Good evening and welcome everyone. And today we have once again Desh Kapoor ji, and we have Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs creating so much of news, so much of noise, so much of waves that the whole new world order is reshaping, and also how different countries are reacting to the reciprocal tariffs. And so, for a detailed discussion, we'll be having in today's session. And so, Desh, right now you can see that I have this statistics with me that these are the tariffs which is imposed by the Trump administration on different countries. So you can see European Union 20%, China 34%, and also the trade deficit with those particular countries as well. So, Desh, just now the news is coming that Trump has given China 24 hours to roll back or withdraw the retaliatory 34% tariff it imposed on US goods, failing which Chinese goods would be punished with 104% tariffs. So, what is happening, Desh? And so Trump is saying that he's taking all this drastic measures to somehow save the US economy from falling. How do you see this?
Yeah, I think it's a thanks again for calling me, and I think it's always great to come to your show. So thanks again, Jay. Actually, this whole scenario is a repeat of like what has happened earlier on, and like if you really look at how Trump has positioned this and how it has been perceived as, well, we'll go back to like what we used to be, and where the tariffs used to be great and the tax cuts would happen. The problem is that the world and the supply chains of the entire industries have been set, and because of that, what has happened is that the industry flows are happening. The US in the last few decades moved from a manufacturing economy to a services economy. Now, like if we take EU for example, US actually imports more manufacturing goods, but exports more services. So yes, there is an imbalance, but there is an imbalance in services as well, which we are not talking about. And a lot of multinationals, which are American multinationals, are actually in Europe as well. So they could be impacted. Now, what is happening is that the retaliatory measures that China and EU will start taking will actually create far more complexities than we have imagined, because they have already started talking about stopping the American companies from coming in, even in defense and like other areas. Not just that, they also want to create an alternative to Visa and MasterCard, because they say, well, China has Alipay, US has Visa and MasterCard, where are we? So that's a valid question that they have. So it's not just the goods and services that will be impacted. There are a lot of other things that will be set in motion. Like when I was writing my last newsletter, on Sunday, I was actually doing my research on it, and I came to this point where, like, when the Constantinople fell, and Mehmed II actually took over and it became an Islamic country, so it became Istanbul. He put a lot of tariffs on anyone trying to go from Europe to Asia. Now, what that did was it set into motion another thing. The European powers actually started taking the sea route. When they started taking the sea route, they actually, America, they went to America. They became colonial powers in Asia. India fell. And since Mehmed II had used gunpowder, the gunpowder weaponry became far more pronounced. And that is going on even today, whether we see missiles or bombs or whatever it is, right? Now that set into motion so many things that he could have never imagined, just by putting tariffs, exorbitant tariffs on anybody who was going from this continent to that continent. Now, if these things get started, what will happen is that new alignments will start. Now, if uh, from the supply chains which were there, like we would have suddenly the redirection of everything into the countries where the tariffs are lower, at least for now. Like we don't know what will happen tomorrow. So things are going to be set into motion that we do not know right now. But does that mean that Trump was completely wrong in doing that? Maybe not. Maybe see the other countries, whether like if we look at China, for example. Now China subsidizes so much of its own goods, and then it puts tariffs on anybody else actually trying to sell their goods in China. Now what that means is that China actually likes to sell stuff out but doesn't want to take in. So that is also not correct. Now, if somebody wants to, punish China for that, then they'll retaliate. Yes, they'll retaliate, but the but the point is that their manufacturing industry cannot survive this, because as long as they have the money coming in, then they can subsidize the manufacturing that happens in their country so that they can sell cheaper. But then they can sell cheaper if the tariffs are lower. Our The problem that is going to happen is that they won't have the money to subsidize. One, second, the tariffs will go higher. Now, in the last few years, if you really see, like within the United States, you'll see that, like when we see people selling to United States, now it is almost like a unending, unlimited kind of demand for everything. And the reason for that is because Americans find things far cheaper. A car, same car, Ford, maybe in US will be far cheaper than, say, in Europe. Now, it is very, very common for people to just buy a TV and buy 3 or 4 TVs. How many of us buy 3 or 4 TVs just for and change the TV after 1 year, or if like something goes wrong with the TV, just throw it out and get a new one? Like how many of people in India do that? Because the consumption has become the new routine. People have storage spaces. They, the basements, the garages are full, and then like if that is not enough, like after having 4 or 5 bedroom houses and having storage there, they actually buy another storage. The storage industry in US is doing like so great in the last so many years, and the reason is because people just keep buying because they can afford it. They can afford it because like it is cheaper to for people to sell in the US and for people to actually create that. Now, yes, so many American companies are the ones which are actually doing all these things by manufacturing things outside and then bringing it in and making the money and all those things. But the fact is that it has created an economy which is so huge, but it may be fake, right? Because how many things do we really need? Now, if all that demand, which is actually an overspending, comes down to the normal living standards, then would the global demand be exactly what like it is today? Probably not. What that means is going forward, the manufacturing will come down, the demand will come down, and so will the energy prices, right? Because the energy required will be coming down, and a whole lot of things will start happening. Other countries have done so well, have increased their GDP and all those things because they have been selling to US. And American consumers have been making sure that those countries are becoming like richer and like higher in GDP. Now, whether it is Vietnam or it is Mexico or it is China. So that is how it has been happening. Even in India, if you see, the IT services company have been doing extremely well, but they have not really sold anything of real value. What they have been selling is cost arbitrage, just as all the goods manufacturer have been doing. But China has been a little smarter than the rest because it has used that money to actually get into higher tech for itself. So in that sense, it has been smarter, but it has been using for the global trade. It has been using the cost arbitrage so well, and the subsidies and the tariffs. That is going to go away. So I think like we are looking at when we see the Liberation Day tariffs, and then increased this thing, the dynamics going on, the retaliation and all those things. Like we will see that this will not only play out in the economic world, this will also play out in the geopolitical world, like in a big way. So I think it's going to be a very interesting time, in interesting, not necessarily great for people, because economies will suffer and jobs will suffer, companies will suffer, but things will change. The dynamics will change. Countries, their entire destinies will change. So I think it's a period of opportunity and a period of struggle for the world.
So do you see that Trump's decisions are right in saving the U.S. economy as of now?
Uh, so I think it could be like right or wrong, right? Like in the sense that like something was going great and things were going on their own way, not necessarily always benefiting the US, in the sense that the debt had increased, the inflation was increasing, the US as a hub of goods and services had gone down, and there was only so many things that US could sell to outside world. The one thing that it sold the most was actually arms and ammunitions, which created its own deep state military industrial complex. But there was really uh, not a whole lot apart from the high tech that US was selling, and services. But when it came to China, I think Trump's greatest worry was that where China is going. China is not the China that Americans were thinking it is, right? Because over time, China has actually become competitive enough in high tech and really cutting edge technology, whether it's defense or like everything else. In that sense, China is a major threat. Uh, you know, like long time back in the 1930s, also there was Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. Now, Smoot-Hawley a Tariff Act, which was done in 1930, like it was because the Great Depression was just about to begin, and farmers were struggling because they had over production, their prices were falling, and US actually put very high tariffs on 20,000 imported goods, mainly agricultural products. There was a big retaliation, especially again from Canada and the European nations, because they also put tariffs, retaliatory tariffs. The global trade came down. Between 1929 and 1934, 66% it fell. US exports fell down. There was unemployment. It actually deepened the Great Depression. So, and the worst thing was that America did not care who was an ally, who was not, just like it is happening now. They did not give a damn. And what that created was not just the economic, depression, but also a situation where the Europeans started saying that we are on our own, we don't care about US, we have to do our own thing. That is when the stage was being set for World War II and World War. All the like Nazi movement started, nationalist movement started, and all those things. So, and the next time it happened was when Ronald Reagan actually put on Japan, because Japan was rising. Japan became a threat. They wanted to contain Japan. So they put a lot of tariffs on them, whether it was the auto industry or the chip industry. Now, the same thing is happening again, that China is actually becoming an economic threat. So they want to actually do the same thing to China. The difference is Japan was actually uh, almost like a vassal state of the US. Japan did not have much of leeway of their own, right? Because their entire defense and everything is totally controlled by US. They cannot have their own defense industry. They can not have their own military and things like that. China is not like that. China doesn't give a damn about all these things because it is in competition with the US and the Europe for all these things. So what will happen? China will actually start, diversifying, trying to go to Europe, Asia, and Africa, and Latin America, and it has already made inroads there. So in that sense, uh, like it will become very complicated. But it was also the path that US was on was also not very sustainable, right? Because the American dollar like really was like losing its steam in the sense that the debt was rising. The interest rates on the debt were also rising. The interest payments that US made this year was higher than its defense spending. The first time in the US history it happened like that. So, and it is like over $1 trillion of interest payments just on debt. That is going to keep on increasing if the inflation increases, if the interest rates increase. So, so in that sense, it was very, very important to to make sure that the trade imbalance that was not there. So in some ways, I think he's trying to disrupt a lot of things, which uh, should not happen the way it was happening. But but another way, he has not he has not differentiated between allies and adversaries, and that may be a mistake going forward.
So, how do you see now that the European Union is also not on the side of Donald Trump as far as Ukraine is concerned, and there's this whole, Trump is being sidelined by European Union as well. So, how do you see all this tariff wars, and how does India stand to gain in all this?
Yeah, I think the way I see with India is that this tariff on India, like there was a trade deal discussion going on, right? And I think it is in a very advanced situation, like advanced state. This tariffs that were put like 26% may be a way to get better negotiation on that. But in the same vein, it is also true that India has a least tariffs in the southeast or the like Asian region, which means that India actually gets to gain. The things that will be taxed more from India will be, that entire trade is not that much. India does not sell so much to the US as much as China does. Like somebody was saying that the total impact of the whole thing may not be more than 10 to 20 billion, which is really nothing when you look at a $4 trillion economy like India. So if you're looking at just an impact of 10 to 20 billion, that is almost nothing in that kind of context. But like what it will do is that it will bring a lot of other countries, because if the trade deal actually goes through, and if India makes concessions for, say, like some of the goods like coming from US to India, then India can actually drive a better deal. The thing is also that Indian manufacturers also need to step up. See, it's not like it's like Indian manufacturers cannot do well. Indian manufacturers can compete. They can do well, and they can beat the best in the world. Like if for people who are in the US, they'll know that Mahindra tractors have actually competed and done well in America's southern region against the John Deere and other tractors, which were like generational thing. Still, Mahindra tractors, it got into that market on their own and actually did well. Now that is a very like rare thing that happens, right? And Mahindras, even in India, are making better cars now than they were earlier, because they are making that effort. That effort has not been done by a lot of other manufacturers, which should have been done. So, and also, a lot of other businesses. In fact, like when you look at Piyush Goyal's, that whole speech about the startups, like you will see that is what he's trying to say. That guys, like you have really not done what needed to be done for the startup. All you've done is actually trying to create a faster delivery models, and like things which are not highly value adding for the country. So in one sense he's right, and he's got a lot of backlash from a lot of startup people, and in some ways it is right. Some ways I would say that like India could have, the startups, the companies could have done better. We really do not have companies which could do what, say, the Chinese companies have done. I mean, like if, and I'm, since I have been in the IT industry, I am the most disappointed with the IT companies, because they have really not created the kind of products that they could have done. If Zoho can do it, Sridhar Vembu can do it sitting in Tamil Nadu's rural areas. If he can create a product company which can compete with Microsoft and Google, why couldn't other companies do? If Odoo can do it sitting in Gandhinagar, if that guy from Belgium can come to Gandhinagar and create that, why couldn't other companies do like a much better job than all these things that they've been doing? All they've been doing is just cost arbitrage and using people like coolies. So in that sense, I think Indian companies now have an opportunity to actually prove their worth, prove their value, and also stand. And it's not like they can't; they can. They just haven't made that effort. So I think it'll be a growing up period also. Plus, a lot of manufacturing can actually come to India, and India can become a hub for a lot of other things. So in that sense, I think it'll be the coming time may actually be the best time in the next 3 to 4 years at least for India, given how the dynamics are working. And I believe that the trade deal that India is working with the US will actually prove to be much more beneficial for India than uh, these tariff and trade wars have been for other countries. So in that sense, India will tend to gain.
Yeah, Adesh, interestingly, Mohandas Pai, he told Piyush Goyal that there are very many small deep tech startups in chip design, IoT, robotics, EV charging, BMS in India. And the funding, there's a huge difference between India and China in the startups. Indian startups got only $160 billion from 2014 to 2024, while China got $845 billion. Do you see this also, that there's not enough funding in deep tech startups in India?
Uh, so I would differ, and the reason is because what can government do in this? I mean, after all, the funding comes from the venture capitalist companies, the venture capital companies, the investment bankers. Now, if they see value, if we can prove that like there is value in what we are doing, like why wouldn't they come and fund them? And there are enough of venture capital firms within India itself. They can also do it. So it's not as if, I mean, how can government really increase that fund for the startups? Like unless and until like he thinks that the government should be funding all these startups, but why? So that will create even like bigger like red tape and like use of the bureaucracy, which should not happen. Bureaucracy of the government should not be funding the startups. It should be the private companies, the private venture capital. And if the private venture capital goes to China and the other like countries, like why wouldn't they come to India if like somebody from India was doing some great work? And if they are doing, then they need to pitch it better. Like if the only reason why they may not be able to do it is because the ecosystem may not be there to actually like create that kind of mechanisms where people can actually pitch their product and their firms better. So and it's not like people are not getting like funding. Like I know of some of the startup guys who are actually getting funding from if they are in fintech, they are getting like funding from the other fintech companies which have done well. So there is like money if you can prove your worth. So I don't really like understand that comment. I mean, I have a very high regard for Mr. Pai, but like in this situation, I would say that like what can government do? Like what a government can do is reduce the red tape. What it can do is push the bureaucracy to do things right. Now, people have actually said that even though the government ministers like may not be corrupt, but the bureaucracy is as corrupt as it always was. There has been no difference. And because even today, the things are not working the way they should have. And I think that is a valid argument and like the critique. And that needs to change. But there is only so much that the government can do in terms of changing the bureaucracy, unless unless and until they just completely like wipe out the entire administrative staff. Because these guys have lived on bribes and corruption and all those things, and they're not going to let it go so easily. So in that sense, there is a valid criticism across the board, but that criticism it cannot be levied totally on the government. Because suppose the government says today that the IAS is like banned, IAS is finished, the civil services exams is finished, we are not going to hire anyone through this. Do you think anyone like will like it? There'll be a like big bonfire of things. So the thing is that like how do you tame the bureaucracy without changing the fundamentals of the country? And like that is where the problem has been. So I think the companies also need to look within and say that are we doing things which can change the country and the world in a more profound way, and like is it worth selling? If it is worth selling, people will come and buy it.
Yeah, Desh, also coming to the next point is that Goldman Sachs has issued a warning that oil prices could fall below $40 per barrel in an extreme scenario as global oil markets experience very big volatility. So, how do you see this report from Goldman Sachs?
Yeah, I think that is actually a very good warning. Like good in the sense that is a very valid warning. And so think of it like this. Now, if like US has put 100, like if they put 104% tariff on China, China puts retaliatory tariffs. Europe also puts tariffs. What will happen is that the overall industry, manufacturing would come down. If the overall manufacturing comes down, then the need for energy will also come down. And when the need for energy actually comes down, and the world, the global businesses actually go into a depression or recession, deep recession. Now what that would mean is that the demand for oil and all the industry will also come down. Now the oil prices will fall. The energy companies will face a lot of pressure, and also countries like Iran, like Saudi Arabia, like Russia will also face a lot of issues, because their economies are actually heavily reliant on oil revenues. So if that starts, then it would actually start a lot of political unrest in those areas. And there will be a collapse in their economies. So, and plus the movement for alternative energy, like and push for EVs and all those things will also come down, right? Because if the oil price is $40 a barrel, which could happen, then we are looking at hardly any incentive to go to the alternative energy or EVs. So so that is a very likely possibility, right? uh, all these, even US producers of oil, will need the prices to be above 50 to 60 dollars a barrel. So it could, there'll be contraction in industry, because of this tariffs and all that, recessionary time, and also a contraction in the US energy sector. And a lot of it could trigger a lot of bankruptcies and layoffs and things like that. So that can keep on multiplying into a depression if nothing is done. And also that could push the investments to actually go more towards gold and USD, at least in the short term, and the treasury market, which I think has already started. So so I think there will be a major impact on the oil producing countries, whether it is Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Nigeria, Venezuela, even US, Russia. So so they could see a lot of political impact on that. So I think, and I really think that Goldman Sachs may be on the right track when they say this.
So, Desh, with Trump in office, there's news each and every day that he keeps changing his decisions each and every day. That you don't know what to expect, isn't it?
Right.
So, any closing comment from your side?
Yeah, I think he's the kind of guy who likes to come heavy on people, and then use that as a way to drive deals. So what he is doing may be a way to drive the deals, but it also is a way to actually change the current structure of the global order. See, I was in India and we were talking, and I was saying that, to some folks I was discussing in an investment, management firm, that you might think that Trump is taking all his decisions based on policies and based on economics and things like that, but that may not be so. And the reason is because how he has come in and how the other forces have worked on him. Even like when he was so close to presidency and he had not become the president, even then there were enough forces which were trying to beat him down, in the sense of, putting lawsuits, even trying to assassinate him. Imagine what will happen after he goes off. Those forces will not stop. They can actually create mess for his life. So he needs to, rattle the whole cage in such a way that those forces will not be in power when he actually leaves office. So he has a very short time, and that short time basically 500 plus days, because after that the House and Senate and all those elections will start, and things will change, and he may not have as much power as he has now when House and Senate is in his hand. So in that sense, if you see, I think the time frame that he has is very low, like very short. And that short time frame means that he has to do a lot in a very radical way. Sometimes we think that he's actually working out of policies and economic, factors and geopolitics and all that. That may not always be true. So I would say that why he is doing all these things, it may have different reasons and motivations to do all these things. So that is something that only he can know based on his own calculations of what can happen to him and how he wants the world to change. So I think it's important to understand the movement that brought in Trump, because we should not always look at Trump as Trump. There is a whole movement behind him. That whole movement and of the realities of Trump going forward. So that is how I would look at it.
Thanks, Desh. It has been a wonderful session, and we will see you again next week. Until then,
Thank you.
Jai Hind and Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Hind, Jai Shri Ram. Thank you.